Hey everyone, it's Christy again, and I'm here with another set of tips and tricks for beginners learning search engine optimization or SEO. And today we are going to talk about on-page SEO. So you do on-page SEO after you've done all of your research, you've made sure that the search engines can crawl your website. And so the next thing that you do is you optimize the content on each page of the website. And that's what we call on-page SEO. And I know a lot of my clients think this is what you do. This is all you do for SEO. As you already know, if you watch the other tips, you know there's a lot more to it, but this is what we are going to cover today. All right, so there are a few things that you can do to help with your on-page SEO. And all of them are tweaking things that you may have already added if you've already written a blog post, for example, or you've created a page or something like that. These are all things that you can tweak on that page or blog post to improve the search engine optimization for that. So the first one is optimizing your title tags. And I'm going to switch over to a web page to do this. I'm going to switch over. I'm using WordPress in this example. And my title in WordPress is this bit right here that says repurpose content. That is my title. Now, if I am going to write a blog post and I don't want that to be the title that shows up in the search engine for whatever reason, that where it says repurpose content, by default, that's what's going to show up. If I don't want it to look like that, I can actually change the title using, if I'm in WordPress, using a plugin. And you can also see if you want to, I'm going to show you how to do it in Wix and also in Squarespace in just a minute. But I use a plugin for search engine optimization called Yoast SEO in WordPress. And we can see here that there is an SEO title setting, and it's got title, page, separator, site title. These are all variables. If I wanted to, I could just delete all that and say repurpose content Pongos Interactive. All right, so that looks pretty good. And you can see there's a little preview up here that looks pretty good. Now, just a few tips when you are optimizing your title tags. You don't want them to just say whatever is the first title on your page like this. In this case, it's okay, but you want to keep it short. So you want to keep it relatively short. And you can see in this case, mine is pretty short. And this little green line here indicates that it's a good length. The length should be between 50 and 70 characters, give or take. So a couple over is not too bad, a couple under, not too bad, but you want it to be around 50 to 70. You do also want to keep it simple. So simple is good. Don't get everything in the kitchen sink in that title. You don't want to necessarily put in, everything that the page is about or the post is about, just a summary of it. You also want to use one or more of your keywords. So remember, we're optimizing for those keywords that we've already researched, and we want to make sure that they are in your title. So that way, if somebody is searching for example, repurposed content, they're going to see that repurposed content is right there in my title. Now, the other thing is, don't just put the keywords at the beginning of the title. I'm sorry, you do want to put the keywords at the beginning of the title, but you don't want to just stuff keywords in there just to have them in there. So for example, if I was writing a blog post about SEO, I would probably put something about SEO in the title, but I wouldn't necessarily stuff in everything about SEO into the title. So I wouldn't say SEO, crawlability, on-page SEO, and I wouldn't just put in random keywords just because I thought they would help me with my SEO, because they won't. You want to just make the title natural. And then the last thing is to use your brand name carefully. So you can see here in this example, I've said repurposed content, Pongos Interactive. That's a careful use of my brand name. I don't want Pongos Interactive to be at the beginning of the title for a blog post. For the homepage, sure. Homepage, it's totally fine, but you don't necessarily want it to be at the beginning for a blog post or additional pages in your site. So a lot of like Yoast SEO automatically lets you put the blog post name at the beginning and then the site title at the end. I recommend doing that. And then you can play around with the title after you do that. If adding the title of your site makes the blog post title too long, delete the title of your site. It's pretty simple. All right, so the next thing we're going to look at is your URLs. URLs here. Okay, so URLs. So the URL is the address to the web page. And in a lot of blog posting software like WordPress, Wix, Squarespace, Blogger, stuff like that, you're going to end up with a name at the end that is called the slug. And you can see over here on the bottom right side of my screen, I've got a URL slug right there. I don't know if you can see that highlighted, but it's right there. So the URL slug is right now it's set to repurpose content over there on the right. And that's nice and short, which is what you want. You want it to be short. You also want to make it relevant to the page. And in this case, repurpose content is the title of the page or the post, and repurpose content is also the URL slug. So it's pretty relevant. You also want to use all lowercase. Don't mix cases. So I wouldn't type in like repurpose with a capital R and content with a capital C. You'd want to just keep it all lowercase. All lowercase is better. And then the next thing is if you're going to separate words, like you can see I did here, add a dash. So don't just have all the words put together. So like, for example, if you can imagine, like I had a post called optimize images with tiny PNG. If I smushed all of those together in a single slug, that would just look horrible. It would be really hard for my, not only the website, but for my users that are seeing my website on search engine result pages to figure out what to do with that. And we're going to separate those words with dashes. You can see here there's a dash right there separating them. All right, so the next thing we're going to look at is the headings. So the headings are, you can see I'm highlighting these here, these larger bold font that I've got right here, so we can see those there. Now the headings are to help break up the text in your web page or your blog post. Use them correctly. A lot of my clients come to me and they want to do search engine optimization. They've used their heading tags correctly. A lot of times they use the heading tags to because they like the way that it looks. So they like the bold, large text and they like the way that it looks. But they've maybe added a level 3 heading instead of a level 2 heading. So I want you to, if you're able to, in your content management system, I want you to change the way that a particular bit of text looks, not using a heading. So use whatever styling tools you've got to edit it, but don't use the headings except for the way that they're intended. So if you think of a Microsoft Word document, you've got headings in that. Same thing in there. You're supposed to use a level 1 heading, and your title for most blog software is going to be the level 1 heading. So you can see here, in this case, repurposed content is my level 1 heading. And then my level 2 headings are going to be the ones that go under that. So I've got one here that says, what is content repurposing? And you can see here it's a heading and it's listed as a level 2. If I change that to a level 3 heading, you can see it looks a little bit smaller, but I want it to be a level 2 heading. So you want the level 2 headings to go under the level 1 heading. The H1 is what it's called. And then if you have subsections under a level 2 heading, those would be level 3 headings. If you had subsections under a level 3 heading, those would be heading 4. And you can go all the way down to heading 6 if you've got a very complex page. Most posts that I've seen maybe need a H1, which is, again, the title, H2, and maybe some H3s. I don't usually see them getting so complex that they need an H4, but you never know. So just use them correctly. All right. Again, make sure you only have one H1 tag per page. That should be the page title, or in this case, it's going to be that bit of text right there. And also try to include your keywords in the headings and not just in the level 1 heading. So not just in this H1, you want to try to use them in your subheadings. So you can see here, I use repurposed content, which is the keyword for this post. I use that in one of my subheadings. If you can use it in more than one subheading, great. If not, don't force it. Don't try to have it there. If you can have the keywords at the beginning of the heading, that's even better. You want to try to do that if you can. All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about is optimizing your meta descriptions. And again, in WordPress, I'm going to go down to this Yoast SEO bit right here. And we can see here at the top of the page, I've got this meta description. And the meta description is not actually, it's not super necessary for SEO. I mean, it's good to do for SEO. It's more for the search engine result page. So the meta description is usually, not always, but usually what shows up in the search engine result page. So this is the text here. It says, do you feel like you're constantly trying to come up with new ideas for content? Get off that hamster wheel and repurpose your content. So this is going to be what shows up, and I can see a little preview of what it would look like. That's going to be what shows up in the search engine result page. If you don't do that, then different search engines are going to do different things, but a lot of times they're going to say what the beginning of the content is, and it may not look great. It may not be exactly what you want. Now, your meta description, you do want it to be short. So 1 or 2 sentences is fine. Try to keep it under 160 characters so it will fit in that space right there for the search engine result page. You also want to use your keywords. It doesn't really help with the SEO, but you want to use it because you want your users, they've searched for repurposed content, for example, and they want to see very quickly that the results are going to have repurposed content. The other cool thing is that when you search for a specific string, so if I search for repurposed content, the search engine result page actually highlights those words in the results. So it's going to highlight that in my meta description in the search engine result page. You also want it to be unique. So I wouldn't go through and put Pondos Interactive is a web development company as the meta description for every single page on my site and every single post on my site, because then people wouldn't know what's on the page. It's supposed to be sort of a preview of what's on the page. The other thing that can help is make it actionable. So I didn't do this for this particular one, but you can make it actionable, like read this post now or download the ebook or something like that. So give the users an action that you want them to do when they look at this post or page. And then also make sure the description actually matches the content of the page. If it doesn't, then you want to fix the meta description or the content, whichever is correct. And you want to get them to match, because you don't want to do a bait and switch where people look at the search engine results page and they see that meta description that says one thing, and then they actually get to the post and they're like, wait a minute, this isn't what I was looking for. So make sure that those match. Now, very quickly, I'm going to switch into Wix because I've shown you how to change the title and the meta description on WordPress, and I want to show you real quick in Wix how to do that. So I'm in Wix right now, and I'm in a blog post, so I'm in my new post. And if you look over here on the left side, you can see where it's highlighted, the SEO is highlighted. So if I go into the SEO settings, I can see here, there is where I can change the URL slug. I don't recommend changing that after you've published. So after you've published and shared, and I'll talk more about this when I get to the best practices video, but don't change the slug. There are ways you can change it. It's a little bit technical. Again, I'll talk about that in the best practices video, which is the next one in this series, but it's not the next one. It's the one after the next one. Next one's about authority building. But you can change it. I just don't recommend doing it unless you have the technical ability to do that. And you can see here is the title tag. And then we've also got the meta description there. And this is also really important. You've got this setting here that says, let search engines index this page. You definitely want that to be turned on. Now, very quickly, I'm going to also look in Squarespace. So this is a Squarespace demo site that I set up. And if I go down to this blog post 4, I'm going to click on the 3 dots and go into the settings. And you can see there is a SEO section there. And again, you can add a title and you can also add a description. So those are going to be your SEO title and description. And this is really useful if the title or the title is different from the actual post title. The other thing, if you go into, where is it? I always forget where it is. Social, is it content? Yeah, it's content. Sorry. Took me a second there. You can change the slug here for the URL for the site. So, or for the post. So if you ever needed to do that, you can. Again, don't recommend doing that unless you know what you're doing. All right, so back to what you can do. The next thing is optimizing your images. So optimizing your images. I don't have any images on this one, but I will add one just to show you real quick. Let me add a new section. I'm going to add an image. All right. I'm going to use the media library. And I'm just going to use an image that I've got here. All right. So there's my image. Now, you want to use descriptive file names. I know it doesn't really matter. I can't really see it. I can't see the file name. But if I was to replace this, let me look at it right there. The media URL right now is screenshot, blah, 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 blah. It actually does show what it is, and I can change that. So I might want to change that to, well, I can't change it here, but I might want to change that to screenshot of Google search results, search engine results, instead of just saying screenshot. A lot of people use stock photos, and stock photos come with names like Adobe stock underscore and then a number. When you upload files like that, it doesn't give any context to what the image actually is to the search engine. It can't see quickly that it's related to the content of the page. So it's good to use descriptive file names for them. Now, another thing you want to do is add alternate or alternative text. And so I've got this image selected. If I go over here in WordPress, over on the right side, I've got this alt text setting here. Alternative text it's not only good for search engines, it's also good for accessibility. So if somebody's coming to your website and they're using a screen reader, they can't see the image, this alt text is going to be read to them. It's gonna tell them what the image is. So you want to be as descriptive as possible. So I'm going to say search engine results page for coding summer camp. So not as descriptive as I would probably get for some of them, but that is okay. That's fine. The other thing you want to do before you upload your images is resize them and compress them if you can. So resize them to use the correct size. So you can see here, WordPress does this automatically for me a little bit. So you can see right now I'm using the full size image, but WordPress also creates a medium version of the image, which is much smaller, like 300 pixels wide. And it also creates a 150 by 150 image. So WordPress does that automatically. Some of the other content management systems do that as well. But if you know that an image needs to be a specific size, crop it to that size or resize it to that size before you upload it, because otherwise you are going to have a very large image that has a very large file size. And the same is true of compressing the images. So I use a tool, and I've mentioned this in another blog post about compressing or optimizing your images. I use TinyPNG to optimize sometimes. There's actually a TinyPNG plugin that I have installed on most of my websites that I use to optimize my images, and it automatically does it when I upload them. So it just saves me a little bit of time. But if you're uploading to your Wix site or your Squarespace site or whatever other content management system you're using, you do want to optimize the images before then. This is really important. Optimizing the images, it's going to help with the performance of your website, which is technically technical SEO, but I'm including it on here because it's related to images. So it's important to do. All right, let me delete this so I don't accidentally save the post with that in there. And I want to talk finally, the last thing we're going to talk about is link text. So you can see here, I've got this link text. It says, I turned a new website checklist blog post into a downloadable checklist lead magnet. Now, that is called anchor text. So anytime you've got text with a link around it, that text is called anchor text. You want the text in the anchor text to be descriptive. You don't want it just to say click here or download now or something like that. You want it to actually describe what it is that they're clicking on, what it is that they're downloading, or anything like that. Part of that is, again, because you need screen readers to be able to see that text, and the people that are using screen readers to know what it is that they're clicking on or what it is that they're going to. The other thing that this helps with is the search engine optimization. Now, if you're able to use your keywords in your anchor text, so if you're linking to another website, or you're linking to another page within your website, which we will talk about in the next video, then the links should include, if possible, they should include your keywords. But just like I was talking about with the headings, don't just stuff them in there. Make sure that it's relatively accurate to be in there. Make sure that it makes sense for it to be in there. Don't just stuff them in there just for them to be in there. And you also want to make sure that they are actually relevant. So you can see in here, the reason that I mentioned this blog post, this checklist blog post, is because I'm talking about repurposing content. So even though the content doesn't necessarily make sense to go with the repurposing content, it sort of does. But even if it doesn't make sense, I'm using it as an example. But it is relevant in this case. But if I was using an example, like if I was writing a blog post about optimizing my images, I probably wouldn't link to a blog post about virtual meetings, unless that was important to virtual meetings. But you get the idea. All right, so that is not everything for on-page SEO, but it's a lot. I don't want to make this video too long, but hopefully you found that helpful. And I want you to go through and start optimizing your web pages. If you have pages that are already posted, like if you've got blog posts that are already posted, you can go through and optimize them after you've posted them. Just don't change the slug. So if you've already published a blog post and it already has a slug in there, don't change the slug, but you can optimize the rest of the page. You can go through and you can add your headings, you can fix your headings, you can optimize your images after the fact, and it will help with your search engine optimization. So I hope to see you again next time. And in the next video, we're going to talk about building authority, so search engines will trust your website. And a lot of that's going to be talking about things like backlinks, which I'll explain in the next video. So I'll see you next time.